We are live, says the message on my screen. Good morning, everyone. Hope we have some people from Pioneer Valley, but you're welcome to join us if you've always been welcome to join us if you're not from Pioneer Valley. My name is Annemarie Matulis, and we'll do a more in-depth introduction. Good start, Annemarie. Oh, so let me do this. Why don't I just stick to the outline, all right? So why are we here today? Who are the impacted family and friends within our communities, and how can this workshop series that we're going to be talking about, which is the Finding Inner Peace Wellness Workshop, um, help better identify us, impacted family members, and what resources we do have and where the gaps are, and why does that matter? And please note that when we're talking about these workshops, they are not clinical. Um, this is a live stream, and this session here is not for crisis um, response. We're not capable of doing that, but I will be flashing numbers across the ticker screen all throughout the hour that give you the crisis text line call to talk and the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And we hope you find that help. So impacted family, who are we? Do you still feel your stomach turn um, when the phone rings at night? If you've had a loved one who's already had a suicidal crisis, or your loved one comes home late, or doesn't call when they're supposed to, um, wondering, where is she? Is he okay? When a family member is ill with cancer or has had a major accident and broken some bones, um, the community, family, friends, community pour out. They just pour out and reach out to rally around you, right? Well, when your loved one's in an emergency department or hospitalized because of a suicidal crisis, no one rallies, no one drops off food, no one asks how they are, and equally important, they never ask how you are because they don't know what to say. If you haven't had those experiences, lucky you. If you have, welcome to our world, the world of impacted family and friends. We're going to break this live stream into three sections, very rough sections, very rough, very flexible. Um, a brief introduction of the who, what, when, where, and how of these Finding Inner Peace workshops. And then between Potter and I, we're going to walk you through some samples and some exercises on how we use them and what our benefits have been from them. And they have been adapted and changed a little bit, but they're basically still the same. So as I mentioned, my name is Annemarie Matulis. I am an impacted family and friend. I am also a loss survivor. And literally only a few months ago did I realize that and acknowledge that I suffer from chronic suicidal thinking for a few years when I was still in a very abusive domestic violence setting. And that stayed buried down until just a few months ago. And that was a revelation for me. Um, I'm going to turn and ask Pada to introduce yourself to you, and then we'll get started.
Hello, I'm Pata Suyumoto, and I am one of the Impacted Family and Friends Massachusetts State Co-Directors. I'm also the Mass Coalition for Suicide Prevention Alliance for Equity Co-Chair, and I do a lot of work in Massachusetts on suicide prevention and mental health in the Asian American communities. I'm also an attempt survivor and a person with lived experience with major depression and complex PTSD. And I was a caregiver for my mother who had bipolar disorder with psychotic features. And I'm still a caregiver for my daughter who has PTSD and bipolar disorder. And in Impacted Family and Friends, I found a community that understood my specific concerns and anxieties as an impacted family member. And I found the exercises in Is This the Night? Finding Inner Peace profound as an educator and a trainer and as a participant, because I felt like I could participate as a facilitator to share what's so powerfully healing. And I just want to mention that we're going to be rolling this out slowly in various communities, including communities of color, and we're planning currently planning a specific series for the Asian American Pacific Islander community. So watch out for that.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
awesome. So thank you for getting up this morning and joining us. Um,
Mhm.
and so what we're going to do right now is we're going to run through a quick overview of how the process began. And I do mean quick. For every person struggling with suicide, there are impacted family members and friends that experience emotional, mental, and physical effects related to their loved one's struggle. We impacted family members and friends may experience a lack of support. Definitely, I wish I could tell you there was a plethora of resources available for us. There aren't. Um, and our own mental health can suffer. Secondary PTS is a very common issue, and people just don't quite know what's wrong. It may not be as dramatic as a full blown post traumatic stress issue, but it can be disturbing and unsettling. And while we may not know the exact number of impacted family and friends, we can only imagine. And so, why don't we know that? Because no one yet has invested money in doing the research on us. We are still very marginalized within the field of suicidology, and hopefully, we'll be able to do that, change that. The purpose of this morning live stream is to guide you through the documented process that has begun to shatter the isolation and marginalization of all who identify as impacted families. So, first step, who are we? Who are impacted family and friends? You heard Pada mention her connection. For me, I have a loved one who is a suicide attempt survivor, and her last attempt was 21 years ago. And I can tell you, I had not a clue on what to do about it. I didn't even realize I needed to be taking care of myself before I tried to help her. And that's too common an experience for people. Now, who are our loved ones? Our loved ones are attempt survivors. We have who have experienced chronic suicidal thinking, non-suicidal self-injury, commonly referred to as NSSI, where people cut or burn or swallow things. The post-traumatic stress I mentioned, struggle with depression, severe anxiety, and eating disorders that lead to suicidal behaviors, substance abuse that lead to suicidal ideation and behaviors and concerns, problem gambling, and suicide concerns. One of the most recent iterations we added was domestic violence and suicidal concerns. And there are those who have been impacted by a murder suicide. We're everyone from those who live in cities and small towns to farmers and first responders and active military veterans and their families because someone could be active military or a veteran and be the family of someone who has attempted suicide or had a suicidal crisis. But in addition, their families, if they have had that lived experience, their own families need to have some resources and some care and a safe place to go and talk about that. Families everywhere, and that includes those who have been impacted and left behind by the suicidal death of a loved one. Um, all cultures, all socioeconomic groups, no family group is unaffected. And with that said, we know there are categories that we still haven't even begun to identify. Every time when Potter and I are together or we meet with someone else, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, oh, okay, now what are we going to do about this? Because there are so many cultural differences that typically the field of suicide prevention and postvention and intervention has not really taken a deep enough dive into to accommodate with appropriate language, with appropriate action. So we're working on that. We are working on that. And our biggest concern is what can we do to help people improve the quality of their life? Um, and go.
Oh, and I just want to say something about families we choose as well. We have our families that, when we talk about family, we're also
Yes.
talking about people, friend circles that are really important to
Yep.
us. And those of us who are LGBTQ plus often, sometimes don't even have, connections with our biological families.
Right.
And we need to make sure that that we see family as a very inclusive concept.
Yes, and again, yeah, that's so important because sometimes when we're talking about family or equity, it seems like such a narrow. Most people look at it in a very narrow slot, and no, we have to. You'll love this one. We have to widen the lens, Potter. We have to widen the lens
Mhm.
over here. Um, and by the way, I bet you didn't know that the category of impacted family and friends and close friends reflect lived experience. Of course, that doesn't get well recognized within the field of suicidology, but we are trying to make enough noise so that we can change that a little bit from time to time. So that's some of the who we are and who our loved ones are. The what of what we've done is create emotional wellness exercises to deliver within a peer to peer setting. And that's so important that we mention peer to peer. These are not clinical. Our workbooks have been vetted onto several platforms and have been stamped as, quote, evidence based, psych educational. We had to pass muster with that in 2016, a couple of years after we started our workshops. And then we had to do another evaluation review in 2019 with the American Association of Suicidology, and a number of people in different states vetted them for us. So it's there. The exercises are threaded with dialectical behavior therapy. Let me say that slower: dialectical behavior therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, and a big dash of 12-step modality. Why reinvent the wheel when you know these things work? Um, all exercises are focused on the individual, improving the quality of their life first. We call it the oxygen axiom, oxygen mask axiom. We're going to do a lot of editing on this one. Oxygen mask axiom. And you, for those who have never honestly been in a plane, and I know that's millions of people, and even for those who are, the stewards and the stewardesses are telling you as you're boarding and you're getting settled in and buckling up, they show you what will happen in case of an emergency. That if these oxygen masks drop down, and say you've got a young child with you, what's our instinct? To put the mask on the young child. And the guidance is no, you must put it on yourself first and take care of yourself and get balanced before you can help anyone else. Well, that's true with impacted family. We want to fix our loved ones. We don't want them to hurt. We don't want them to die. But if we're not taking care of ourselves, we really can't be of any help to that. And how are the workshops delivered? It's for Pioneer Valley because this is specific to Pioneer Valley. We are going to do 2 workshops a month between now and March. And I want to give you the next couple of dates. I'll give you 2 months because we'll all forget them. On September 18th, that's a Saturday at 10 a.m., and September 28th at 7 p.m. And so the schedule right now will be the 3rd Saturday of every month and the 4th Tuesday of every month, September, October, November, December. And that will all get posted and put out. Don't worry about that when we go and do that. And they will be being done virtually, not in person. They're open-ended. You don't have to sign up for all the exercises at the same time. And I want to get this part out of the way because then Potter and I can enjoy the rest of this by sharing our experiences with the workshops. The groups will probably be kept small. You will have to pre-register. By small, I mean 10 to 15. Um, that might even be a stretch to 15, so that it's intimate. You don't have this big volume of people here, so you feel a little more comfortable. And then wellness check. Well, we'll talk about that later. I think I have covered everything, Pata.
Okay.
Yes, because I'll talk about what happens there at another time. So I'm going to turn this over to Pata, and what we're going to do is kind of go back and forth and just sit back at your kitchen table or in the living room, or maybe you're sitting outside. It's cloudy here. I don't know where it is anywhere else. And just hang out. And we hope that something we say along the way in the next 45 minutes might reach out and touch you and interest you in coming into these workshops. Potter, it's all yours.
Thanks. So we're going to go through uh, a, f- a few examples of exercises and share with you sort of what they look like, what what we discuss, and then sort of what we get out of it. And Anne-Marie, feel free obviously to jump in if you
Sure.
have a yeah. Um, but I just wanted to say before I get started that one of the most important things I think is the sense of community and the idea that you are
Mm.
not alone. I mean, I think I find that most helpful that, someone else understands my experience of feeling terrified in the middle of the night about, what tomorrow is going to bring and if tomorrow will bring. So I think that, but just having someone else understand that and have it named has been very important for me. Um, so one of the early exercises is called "How Did It Come to This?" And I think that a lot of us feel that way. How did it come to this? How did I get to this point? How did we get to this point?
Mm.
Um, and in the exercise, it considers how the process, how to approach this process of healing. And we look at a number of lessons learned from others who are IFF and who began the journey and discuss how we feel about these lessons and whether we relate to them or not. This is a very interactive process. It's not like we give you the answers or we give you a map. We give you some things to think about and to process in your own understanding. Um, so lessons that we discuss are, for instance, eliminate the word blame from your vocabulary and your thoughts. Um, and do not blame anyone, including yourself. And these things are really hard to think about because,
Mm.
I think it's natural to want to blame somebody, something, because it's just such a hard situation. Um, Another one is stop searching and prodding for reasons why. They will be revealed over time. You can't force that. Um, and recognize, and this I think is really important, recognize that you need to do something about your inner feelings and anger. I mean, we carry this stuff around, we ignore it because of the crisis in front of us, but at the same time, if we don't deal with it, it will come out and it could create a lot of
Mm.
damage. Um, and one of the things we say at the beginning is like, accept this workshop series is not something to put off and do later. I mean, a lot of times we think, oh, gee, I don't have time to do this right now because I'm so busy dealing with my loved one. But if you want to really support your loved one, you need to deal with this now. You can't put it off. And in fact, both dealing and both supporting your loved one and your own journey of healing are processes, and it's over time that you will see this happen. So putting it off actually is not going to help at all. And that, it's not easy. This stuff isn't easy when we look at it. I
Mm.
mean, when we look at ourselves, it's not an easy process. However, it's beneficial. It's beneficial to us. It's also beneficial to our loved one with that, oxygen mask axiom. Like the more we take care of ourselves, the better prepared we are to take care of somebody else. Um, so, we share these lessons and then we talk about them. Like, how do you feel about this idea of eliminating the word blame from I mean, is this an issue for you?
Mm.
Is it not? How does it play out in your life? So these things get explored. And, I think these points allow us to see that we do need to take care of ourselves to be able to help our loved ones. And the process highlights the idea that blame, isn't really helpful for us or for the person. And it's so easy to fall into that. And instead, it really hinders a clear path toward healing for both ourselves as the impacted family member as well as the person in crisis. So, like looking at these issues of how did it come to this actually allows us to be really think about how we can begin this process of healing. So, anything to add, Anne Marie?
No, you really you covered that well. And I just as I listened to it, um, I know for me when we were designing the workshops, but then always when I listen to other people, it's like sometimes it's a case of you didn't know what you didn't know. You didn't know that you went through it and you didn't feel really great about your own behavior or tone of voice or whatever. Um, and with no explanation, it is just so natural. I've interviewed so many impacted families, and the blame game just comes up so hard all the time. One of the things that I recall so frequently here locally. So everybody, I'm in Taunton, Massachusetts, and it's a microcosm of across the country what we hear parents say about the barriers that are up there of how did it come to this, the fear they have of asking the question, the fear they have of how did it come to this? What did I do wrong? What did I miss? Um,
Mhm.
and they stand in the emergency room, and it's hashtag it is my kid.
Mhm.
Because when I do a lot of the community conversations and trainings and other things, I will always say several times throughout the that hour or so, hashtag not my kid, because that's really where a lot of parents end up. They really do believe that. They really do believe that. But when I know that there's a neighbor 3 houses down who's been in the same emergency department at a different time, or one just over there 2 streets down, the response I would get as to why people didn't reach out for help. I asked them that question, and they'll say, "I'm concerned that if I let people know that my child had to go to the emergency department because they said something like, 'I don't want to be here anymore.' You know, geez, mom, I'm having these thoughts about really doing harm to myself. That someone's going to think I'm a bad parent." And no one ever says that, by the way. They don't. That's in our head,
Mhm.
and that could come from 1,000 different places as to why it comes. But that is such a common statement. It
Mhm.
it really is. That
Mhm.
happens.
I also think that even with adults, there is that sense of what is there's so much stigma that there's that
Hmm.
sense of, do I share this at all? If even if it's
Right.
another adult, your
Yep.
partner, your husband or wife or whatever. I mean, there
Yep.
is that sense of like, can I share this in my community and will I get support? And particularly if you're in a community of color where it might even be more stigmatized than the sort of white American community. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. So my turn.
Yes.
Oh, my turn. Well, everybody, I know now we can share screens and stuff, but I haven't played with it yet, so I'm not going to try it. But I have this graphic, and it's going to go backwards, I'm sure. I can't do the right and left with
There you go. Right there.
the big bad bear. You see that big bear? You see that big kettle that bear's looking at? Yeah. So this is the name of the next exercise. And I would love to tell you that this was my creation. It's not. It belongs to Emmett Fox, a theologian. If you have ever studied his work, has a wonderful treatise on Sermon on the Mount, um, that that has been used. And so this is the bear hugs kettle snag, we call it. And I always start out on when we're doing the workshops. I always start out that I went through that stage in the late 70s into the early mid 80s, that if a new meditation book came out, I got it. So I had like a wall of meditation books. I was going to find peace and inner peace somewhere, and understand the meaning for my life and through that process. And one that someone gave me as a gift is Around the World with Emmett Fox, and his estate after he had passed put together some of his what they felt were his best quotes, or his best little anecdotes that he would share with people. And so the Bear Hugs Kettle was one of them. And I can tell you that in that meditation book on February 23rd, if any of you have it or you ever get it, is about getting tangled in the bear hugs kettle web of negativity, which could impact my entire life. And it took time for me to recognize that I needed to make changes. So I'm going to paraphrase. So out in the West, a group of hunters had been in their campsite. It had been for them a successful day, and they had all of their food and some veggies they took from someone's garden, I'll bet, because they just don't grow anywhere out there. And they had this big kettle boiling away, and it smelled. The aroma was just fantastic. But something interrupted them. They heard a noise. You're out there, know what's out in the woods. And so they all got up together and went off to one side. And as they left, from the edge of the woods, in came a bear, a very large bear. Um, and she went over to the kettle because she was hungry. And what she would do naturally is to pick it up so she could eat it. The problem is the kettle had been on a burning fire for hours. So the bear reached down, wrapped herself around that kettle, and picked it up. And the kettle burned the bear. Now, bears, one of their instincts, it's not their only, but one of their instincts is if they are in pain and feel attacked, they will try to crush whatever is causing that pain. And so the bear pulled it tighter, hugged it tighter, and it burned some more. And that was repeated. The bear kept crunching it in to her body, and the kettle kept burning the bear. And the kettle won, and the bear died. She couldn't let go. And so what I often share with participants in our workshop that my massive bear hugs kettle experience in my life was I was so convinced in the vows that I had taken of till death do us part that it almost did. It was a very abusive, physically abusive, verbally abusive, psychologically abusive marriage. But I had become so convinced that I had to hug that kettle. I had to stay there, no matter what. And what I discovered was when I opened my arms up and let go and stepped away from that toxic atmosphere, it saved my life. And so we talk about that because for impacted family, what can often happen is that as parents, and I'll use the parent, but it isn't just about parents, it could be siblings, it could be, as Paula said, it could be any kind of relationship with a human being who is in a suicidal experience that we so want to fix it. We so want to keep them safe. But we don't necessarily have the skill set. So we hold on to our old behaviors. And sometimes those behaviors are very negative. If someone's depressed, we might yell at them and think they're lazy. And that's science-based. That's not as Annemarie sees it. And so, because we don't know what else to do. And all I had to do was finally learn, let go, and maybe let someone else help do that. Help you walk through that. They'll walk with you. So that's the experience that we have with the Bear Hugs Kettle. I keep telling everybody I'm going to have T-shirts one of these days. Bear Hugs Kettle, and that picture's going to be on it. And I know that in a couple more years I'll walk into a store or somewhere and someone's going to say, "I know what that is. I know what that is. I did Bear Hugs Kettle." It's a simple exercise, and usually what we have people do at that point is we do a lot of writing at these workshops, even virtually. We break time, we shut the screens down and give you some time to write, is to ask people to, if they can, take a few minutes and identify a Bear Hugs Kettle situation in their life. And then when we come back on screen, if people are comfortable, no one's ever forced to do anything. If you're comfortable, share what your experience was and how the outcome was and what steps did you take to do that. And you know what's interesting? Almost everybody shares. Potter and I have tried to identify it. Tracy and I have done some work and we try to identify it. And everybody that we've done the workshops together with, I don't know what the magic is that people suddenly feel safe. in a very quick period of time in these workshops, and I'm more than willing to open up. Pata, I am throwing the ball back to you.
Thank you. And again, I think it has to do with that shared experience, that when you know someone gets it and has a shared experience, you're more willing to share your experience too, you know. So another exercise, which I really relate to, is this frozen in time exercise.
Mm,
And in this exercise, we explore the idea that as impacted family and friends with a loved one in a suicidal crisis, we can find ourselves, quote unquote, frozen in time. We get scared to move forward and ask ourselves questions like, I was planning a trip for this next month. Should I cancel it? Or should I ask for family leave from my job so I can take care of my loved one?
mm,
And for me, my daughter doesn't live in the same state, so I'm always wondering, do I need to go to California to help her? If so, what do I need to cancel or shift? Or, how do I manage this? Do I have to? When? All those questions. And it's important to realize that, they're not, there's no one size fits all. The answers to these questions
mm,
are very individual. Um, However, it's also important to understand that although in the short term we may need to act in a way that focuses on the safety and well-being of our loved one, we may need to cancel. I may need to cancel my webinar or whatever and take
mhm,
care. At the same time, we can't remain frozen in time and do that indefinitely. We can't, because this would be really disastrous for everyone and result in burnout,
hmm,
for me as a caregiver, and also, resentment, because I was just giving up my entire life, you know. So, we after we consider some of these questions and think about, well, what are our frozen in times? We write down, questions we have, such as my California question, that might, um, that we might have questions are frozen in time examples. And, paying attention to being authentic and not censoring ourselves, we really try to, basically let people be raw and let ourselves have that space to just react. Um, and again, in this exercise as well, in all the exercises, we see we're not alone in our experience, and we can see the various ways that these frozen in time moments come up for us. And it also reinforces the idea that we, as caregivers and impacted family, we have needs and wants too. And that we need to try to balance the immediate and long-term needs of the impacted family member and the person in crisis. It's not, um, there has to be some kind of attention to both, to
mhm,
the whole system, not just to the person who is struggling, which is at least my tendency is to say, all right, I'm
yeah,
going to put everything on hold and focus on this person. At the same time, there are consequences to that particular, um, all or nothing behavior, right? That may be deleterious to both me and to my loved one. So that's what I got for that one.
yeah. I'm not sure there's a whole lot to add. I think I was. I remember when I was talking very early. So we started delivering these in 2014, and it was probably 6 months to a year before I ever had someone really come up and talk about the being frozen in time piece. That um, they really wanted to do all those things. They quit my job. I'm not going to cancel my vacation. Um, take the door off the bedroom. I take the door almost to every room except the bathroom, and even then, hang out. And it's like, wow. And that's all fear-driven behavior.
That's right.
It really is. But I think what's important, and one of the things we do offer within our workshops, it's also perfectly normal.
Mhm.
Don't want you to feel that there's something wrong with you, or you're a bad parent. because that's kind of what we have to undo. Those are normal fears. I mean, and those questions can come up under almost any circumstance, of something when the world changes, when there's massive change in your status, your life. If there's a crisis that either you weren't expecting, not that we expect crises, except for hurricane warnings these days, I guess. But we is that yeah? Why would you think you were equipped to do this? Because you have never yet gone through that process. But we do that to ourselves. Well, I should have known better. Well, I should have been. It's like stop the
Yeah.
shoulda, coulda, wouldas.
Right.
It's just stay in the day and work from it. So thank you, Pata, for leading that one up. I just want to touch a little bit on what we call the turning point, because not everybody. Sometimes people are. It really has been interesting when people step back and try to identify it, because it may have been one incident and that was the change, or it may have been a slower series of incidents that happen with it. And so, what we're talking about, and I'll just read the definition. So, all of you out there who've been to an assist training, you know exactly what we're talking about. Those of you who have never been to an assist training, I highly recommend it. It's not meant for everybody. It's an intervention training. Um, but here's how Living Works Education is a marvelous company that develops evidence-based, really cool trainings for people who are looking for a little heavier prevention training or an intervention training. And they have expanded and expanded and expanded. They're considered one of the better ones that we have. And by the way, they're all over the world. Um, so a turning point is defined as an emotionally charged moment when the life side of a person at risk first starts to speak and emerges from a feeling that their story of suicide has been heard. Signals that safety for now might be possible. And that's referring specifically to suicide attempt survivors who may have just really had such a long, long stretch of feeling that there was no other option. They would feel that sense of depression. And then all of a sudden one day, and I will remember when it happened for Tracy, um, how it began to happen. We were having an event at our teen center, and it was our very first International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day. Long title for those bereaved by the loss of someone to suicide. Now, it's an international event, and we had our teen center kids there. They were ages 14 to 19. And we brought in a wonderful woman who had crossed our path a few months before, and her name is Rosie Wallisever, and she came and shared her story with our teenagers, with our kids, and our volunteers, about the very, very gently and very well done story of how she lost her 20-year-old son Adam to suicide. Um, and that was the first time that Tracy, as an attempt survivor, had ever, ever, ever heard a lost survivor share their story. On being on the other side of this. And she described it as being when you see it on film and TV, where everything goes blurry and fades out, and the only thing you can see is that one person or that one object. And that was Rosie. It was like there was a direct line to her. And it impacted her tremendously. The depth of despair, she could feel the pain. She could feel Rosie's pain. And internally, Tracy was so unsettled because she thought of her own mom, and that pain could have been hers too. And it made such an impact on her that over the next several years and right up to today, I can tell you, um, when Tracy still has some disturbing thinking and thoughts, um, she hears Rosie's voice in her ear. And she does every single time. And she hears Rosie laugh, and she can see her smile. Um, and and she'll say, "Not today." And it was maybe a year or two after seeing Rosie that she turned to me at one point. She said, "You know, Mom," she says, "suicide's off the table. I feel shitty right now. I'm not feeling comfortable. I'm not feeling totally safe, but it's not an option." And at that point, she went through 3 years of dialectical behavior therapy because one of her diagnoses that she's very open about and shares as a public speaker was borderline personality disorder, and they had over medicated her on a diagnosis that did not respond to medication in the first place. So she was on the wrong medication and over medicated, and it made her suicidal again.
Mm.
And so she started to understand, and she uses those skills today, but she does not share her story ever without sharing about that connection with a lost survivor, and that was and that was her turning point in life. It really made a huge difference. What happens with those who have lost someone, because we do workshops that we bring attempt survivors and lost survivors together, a blended hearts, is the day they wake up and Pata, I remember, I don't know if you saw it, Jackie posted it on her Facebook a week or two ago,
Mm.
that she woke up in the morning and it was the anniversary of Dustin's loss.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first time in all these 10 years, um, she thought about her grandson's baseball game when she woke up. She woke up, oh, we're going to go watch him play again, as only grandmothers can. And then she stopped dead in her tracks and she realized a turning point. So they're little bits and pieces, but they're important to acknowledge and to recognize. So many of our impacted family, not in the beginning, but now, are lost survivors also. It isn't that they just have someone who has been impacted by a suicide attempt or suicidal thinking. And so, um, and I can share my own turnaround story. It doesn't have to do necessarily with, and this is how we can adapt these. Remember the list of other options and iterations we had is that substance abuse, domestic violence, problem gambling, eating disorders. There are other reasons our families now come to our workshops. It's not all about suicide. It usually comes in there. But I remember the first time as a battered woman and working very hard to get well, that someone came up behind me and touched my shoulder, and I didn't want to turn around and want to smack them right in the face. It was an important turnaround because that person was freed of not getting damaged. Um, and I stopped. I stopped dead in my tracks and I went, wow. Now this poor person is standing staring at me, not clear what they did or what was happening in my head. And I just looked at them and I knew them. I just looked and laughed and I said, "You just saved yourself a punch in the face." And he said, "Thank you, I think." But it's important to acknowledge those. And when we do those exercises, sometimes it takes 2 or 3 go rounds on that exercise for people to be able to identify because they listen to what other people have shared and go, oh, all right, I had that experience too. Right. Balls back in your court, Potter.
Yeah, well, I was going to actually tag on to yours a little bit. I mean, and sometimes those turning points are not a point, they're a process. So for me, it was more when my daughter was born. I mean, I did, I must, had suicidal thinking and ideation and attempt. But when my daughter was born, I really feel very strongly that, as parents, we have this like contract with the universe, with spirit or whatever you want to call it, God, whatever, that, I wasn't allowed to take my life. And I struggled with this. I struggled because I made this contract to be her mom. How can I be her mom and be dead? I can't.
Yeah.
So, but it was a process of coming to that understanding that I had to just decide to live, that I had no choice if I believed that I had this contract. Like I had no choice. Like I had signed it, So for me, but it took me many years to totally accept that fully. So it wasn't like one point, it was like a
Right.
process of understanding. So I think there's many ways that you come to that, that turning point, and it's not just, you know, uh, always a point, it's a
It's
turning
not a
point.
lightning bolt experience
Not
necessarily.
always, not always,
It's a
no.
process.
Right,
It's a process.
right. So, one other exercise, which I think is a really important one, is fear plus control does not equal love.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, in this exercise, we look at the ways that well intentioned support, quote unquote, can really be fear driven control, actually, and cause more damage than help. In fact, we may push our loved one away from us by this fear driven control, and we don't want that. I don't think anyone who's trying to do their best to take care of their loved one wants to push them away. So the question, becomes how do we recognize our own destructive behavior and how can we change it, right? I mean, because I think, when you have, I mean, because for me anyway, it always feels like when my daughter's going down the rabbit hole, everything's out of control. Like it just feels like very chaotic.
Mhm.
I mean, there's so many feelings flying, so many, you know, th- things that aren't happening that should be happening, and things that are happening that shouldn't be happening all at the same time. So, um, I think the first thing that I think is true of almost any process in these things is that you have to admit to what's going on. You have to like, kind of, admit that we need to amend our behavior. That
Mhm.
like, and I think a lot of times our loved ones' reactions are are a clue, right? If you're in constant conflict and they're saying, "You're so controlling" and stuff like that, then it's like maybe, oh, okay. Maybe I need to look at me and not at them. So and then after we like recognize it, because sometimes recognizing is really hard step. It's like it's hard because we are distressed ourselves.
Mhm.
Um, but then we can commit to change. Once we recognize it, we can really commit to change, to being open to information and feedback that can actually help the situation. Um, there's a quote from the workbook that I like. It says, "We mean well, we do, but we can do good. We can, but big but if we can do this, if we admit and accept that perhaps we have been hostage to fear-driven control. We must change ourselves, not our loved one, and then we can really do good." So, this idea that, it's not about changing your loved ones to be more X, Y, or Z. It's about changing ourselves to understand and accept and work within the situation and not just react out of control. So, and I think, we ask certain kinds of questions for self evaluation in this exercise. So there's a series of questions that we ask, and they include, um, have I been rationalizing my behavior is loving, when, if I'm honest, I've really been trying to control their every move under the guise of keeping them safe. So I think, I mean, I certainly, where is that line? For me, it's like, where is that line of checking in with my daughter, for instance, and being overbearing or over controlling, you know, um, and it's a funny line because sometimes she needs me to be more active and sometimes she doesn't. And so I have to adjust too. So I mean, for instance, I have access to her email and I don't read it, I don't look at it. It's just there. So when she's struggling, and she's waiting for a doctor's thing to come in, I look at it and say that your doctor thing is in there. But when she's not struggling and I know something, because she goes, "Don't look at my email." So I'm like, "Okay, I won't look at your email." So, but she knows it's open and she wants me to have it open because sometimes she needs me to. So this is constant tension. But for me, I need to understand that when she says that, that's actually a cue to me. It's like, okay, well, maybe I am overstepping because particularly my adult daughter, and every child needs a certain amount of independence. That's part of the growing process. So another question that we might ask ourselves is, what am I afraid will happen if I let go of this control? And there are a lot of fears there. I mean, they might attempt suicide again. They might go back to drugs or alcohol, or they might, self-harm. At the same time, us trying to control them may not have an impact on that. It may happen anyway. So how do you let go of that kind of control and help them understand that you're there to support them, which is actually, and that you are well enough and not out of your own mind, right, to support them. So I mean, and sort of the bottom line with that is love is not control. And I think for me, certainly as a mom and an impacted family, member, I have to pay attention to this idea that love is not control, and in fact, it inhibits control, inhibits the expression of that love. So, back in your court.
Back in my court, I'm just going to add this one piece, and I just
Okay.
wanted to remind everybody again that the this is our last introductory live stream for Pioneer Valley here in Massachusetts, the Suicide Prevention Coalition, and that on September 18th at 10 a.m. and September 28th at 7 p.m., October 16th at 10 a.m., and October 26th at 7 p.m. So don't try to remember those. We'll get them out. I don't want you to be concerned about that. We'll get them out to you. And I think you've seen the ticker with the director at a voiceathethetable.org. And that's important. That's where you need to reach me if you have any questions about any upcoming workshops that we're going to have. And they're going to be a variety of different things. There'll be a lot of promotion that's going to go out right after Labor Day. I mean, the best people in the world. Earlier this morning, I'm working on a national conference, and I said, should we put the call to papers out this week? And they said, no, maybe midweek next week. If probably a week from Friday would be a good idea.
Right.
And I went, okay, just wanted to be sure. We appreciate your enthusiasm, but so we're not going to put these out too soon, but we need to give you enough time because we will ask you to pre-register. There's a few questions we'll ask you. We just want to tell you that up front. And we're going to send out little care packages, I need to find a better word for it. Some materials for the workshops. We're going to start sending out a workbook and pen and a couple of other things from A Voice at the Table. So that we're looking at the small little coloring books and a couple of things, those little mini ones, so that you can do that. Because if you were in person, we would have them all over the table, big ones all over the table. So we do that. And I just wanted to do this last little piece here, Potter, and then we'll just do final
Actually,
thoughts.
I just want to give a quick, I know this is, for Pioneer Valley, and I hope there are a lot of people from Pioneer Valley here, but I just want to do a quick shout out to the fact that Pioneer Valley if you're not in Pioneer Valley is one of 10 regional coalitions of the Mass Coalition for Suicide Prevention. There are 10 regions, that's the Mass Coalition, the state organization. There are 10 regional, Pioneer Valley is one of them. But just a shout out to the fact that you will see IFF materials and workshops, through other regionals as well. So if you're not in Pioneer Valley or you need another opportunity, there will be others coming too.
Not to worry. We let everybody in, and we try to give everybody the information.
Right. So anyway, I just wanted to
thank you for doing that. So I'm just going to use this right off of something that we published. The exercises outlined in this workshop may not be the answer. We never intended it to be viewed that way, to the quality of life and wellness challenge for this huge population of impacted family and friends. But they offer a starting point, a place to begin to tear down the walls of fear that fear has built and develop new soul care. We're really hard on making sure you can identify your own soul care exercises or things that you do the whole point is to bring some inner peace within in the midst of the chaos, or even if it's post chaos that lingers and we all know it. that we're going. I remind you, it is a peer-to-peer format. And in the original grant funding, you don't usually see these words in a grant. Um, New and innovative. In 2014, this was groundbreaking. In 2021, in some areas and states, it's still groundbreaking, that we're doing things. And I wanted you to understand that the atmosphere is comfortable and casual. I hope that you felt that here today. This is what it would be like. This is not a training. This is not some kind of follow the bouncing ball or else type thing. I also want you to know there will be moments, and you may have felt that today, um, when the sharing exchange, um, may be serious or even sad. Um, but I can tell you that there will be, and there may be tears. There will be just as many times that laughter will rule. Trust me, as we talk about ourselves, and it's like, oh, that was a brilliant move, wasn't it? There's a lot of not ridicule, but just recognition of, I thought that was such a great idea. And we turned out, no, it wasn't. Pada, any last thoughts?
I just want to say that mental health issues, it's a process. It's long term, right? So these workshops are ongoing, and you can revisit them because as an impacted family member, I mean, sometimes she's more stable, sometimes she's not, and then sometimes she's more stable, and then sometimes she's not. But and so as I go through the healing process with her, I can do my own healing. And,
Mm.
and I think these workshops, just because you went through them once, you can revisit them and you can revisit the concepts in them because it is a process both for, uh, you know, me as an impacted family member, as well as a person with my own lived experience with mental health, and my daughter who is going through her own process of healing.
All right. Listen, thank you for anyone who got up and joined us this morning. And the good news is, if you weren't able to get up and join us this morning, this is just going to keep replaying over and over and over on the YouTube channel. So we'll make sure those links are out there. And thank you again, and thanks to Pioneer Valley, the Department of Mental Health, in Massachusetts, for underwriting cost it related, to Pioneer Valley for taking this on out in that area of Springfield, and even I think they're over to Hampden County too. So it's really cool. We hope this is helpful, and I look forward to seeing some of you at our workshops. All
Thank you.
right, take care.
Bye bye.